Since Laust was kicked off his team for being too weak, he joins a new one where his hidden strength is revealed. He is a regular healer who happens to be exceptionally skilled at fighting. Our episode begins today with Lust and Narcinia at the Adventurers Guild. Narcinia is surprised when the guild employee hands her a small amount of money and asks, "Why such a small amount? We gave you a magic stone from a phoenix monster. It's a high-level monster and very difficult to defeat, especially since it also transformed into a fire beast. Why didn't you tell us about this beforehand? We were told we'd need to wait for the amount to be prepared, and now you're giving us such a small sum." Amaris, the guild employee, replies, "Yes, I was the one who told you that. But before you speak to me in this way, perhaps you should see what's inside the bag." Narcinia opens the bag to find pure gold coins inside. Amariste explains, "If I had given you this amount in silver or copper coins, the bag would have been too heavy for you to carry. That's why I prepared it in gold coins." Narcinia is shocked upon seeing this. Laust interjects, "You shouldn't let others see this." He gives Amarist a portion of the money as well, making her very happy. She says, "I'm so glad I'm the one handling your transactions." After that, Laust leaves alone. Amarist notices this and asks Narcinia, "Did something happen between you two?" Narcinia seems worried. The scene shifts to the town where a man is playing with children and telling them a story. He says, "A monster lurks deep within the dark maze. It's not like other monsters. It's an evil creature plotting to take everything in the world for itself. It's known as the evil dragon. Every 200 years, it awakens, and the only one capable of facing it is the brave hero you all know and love. It's a battle for the world's fate. Who will emerge victorious, the evil dragon or the brave hero?" The children shout in unison, "The brave hero!" and seem delighted by the story. The scene then shifts to Lust, who is sitting quietly. Narcinia brings him food and notices he is lost in thought. She asks, "Don't you think this is the perfect chance for us to rent our own house with this money?" Lust is surprised by the suggestion. Narcinia explains that she has been thinking about it for a while. She adds, "If we can afford it, a private house is more practical and economical than renting rooms. I looked into it after you mentioned it. At this stage, we could afford to rent a house, or even buy one if we wanted to." Laus responds, "You may be right, but aren't you comfortable at Lady Mary's Inn?" Narcinia replies, "Not at all. The food is great and the atmosphere is cozy, but because it's such a good inn, it's always crowded and noisy. I want some peace and quiet." In her thoughts, she adds that she wants a quiet place where they can talk alone. Not in a noisy tavern, but in a peaceful room with just the two of them, enjoying warm drinks while watching the fire in the fireplace. She dreams of asking him to teach her many things, and his gentle smile answering all her questions. Learning from an experienced adventurer like him would also strengthen their bond as teammates. She seems deeply in love with him, but snaps out of her daydream. Laus tells her, "We're not ready for that yet. We need to save our money for times of need. Besides, what about Zeke and the others?" Our party temporarily teamed up to fight the Phoenix, but Zeke mentioned last night that he'd like us to form an official team together. We haven't given him an answer yet. If we do form a team, there's no need to rent or buy a house. Narcinia asks, "Do you still want to work with them?" Laust replies, "It's a logical strategy, especially with Zeke. It was clear during the Phoenix fight that he's very strong. If we're going to delve deeper into the maze, I'd really like him on our side." Narcinia tells him she has no objections to forming a team with them, as long as she's with him. That evening, they celebrate forming their new team with food and drink. After the celebration, Ermia starts feeling sleepy and tells Lyra she'll take her to her room. Zeke asks if he can help, but Lyra replies, "I can handle it. Instead, why don't you get to know Lust better? It might help you in the future." She then leaves with Ermia. Narcinia stops Lyra and asks her for advice about something. When she tells Lyra that she suggested to Laust that they live together in one house, Lyra is shocked and says, "You're braver than you look." Wanchasa, Parisa, and Mary, "You've never seen anything like it," but Narcina explains that Lust turned her down, and now she's wondering if he dislikes her. Lyra responds, "He always takes care of you. Maybe he's just shy, but that does seem a bit extreme. Perhaps he's the kind of guy who doesn't like to rush things. It's easy to generalize men, but they're not all the same. You need to be able to see the differences." Narcina replies, You're right, you seem very experienced in love. That's why I thought asking you for advice was the right choice. You really are like a grown woman. I'm sure you know so much more than I do. Lyra responded, telling Narcinia that people often see her as someone wise and experienced, but life would be much easier if that were true. She assured Narcinia that there was no issue and encouraged her to remain optimistic. The scene shifts to Laust and Zeke at a cafe. Zeke jokes that Laust and Narcinia should get married and not treat it as if it isn't important. He points out how obvious it is that Narcinia is deeply in love with him, and he even suspects Laust might feel the same way about her. Laust is stunned and denies this vehemently, explaining that Narcinia is the person who gave him the courage to become an adventurer. When he was struggling and losing hope in his future, it was Narcinia who formed a team with him when he was on the brink of giving up. Zeke, amused, tells Laust that he needs to confess something. He likes Narcinia. This revelation infuriates Laust, leaving him deeply conflicted. Meanwhile, we return to Narcinia and Lyra. Lyra begins talking about Zeke, saying she doesn't quite understand what goes on in his mind. She shares that they met a long time ago, back when they lived together in the capital as part of the same team. Lyra recalls an incident where a man joined their team, hoping to improve his chances with her. Margulis, another teammate, expressed his hope of having a chance with her as well. At this point, Ermia, who had seemed asleep, suddenly wakes up and admits she wasn't sleeping because she was curious about the conversation. Lyra continues, revealing that the man who joined their team tried to assault her when Zeke and the rest of the team were absent. However, she managed to beat him up severely. When Zeke returned, he finished the job and couldn't forgive himself for letting such a person join their group. Afterward, Zeke disappeared, and she didn't hear from him for a long time. Back at the cafe, Zeke shares more of his story with Laust. He says that when he came to this city with Laust business, he never expected to see Lyra again. When they met, she forgave him, even though he couldn't forgive himself. Lyra, however, was never angry with him. She was frustrated because he left on his own, without understanding how she felt. That made her furious. How could he not understand her feelings? At this moment, Sheila, the waitress, arrives with their food. Zeke asks Laust, "If you're in love, then why did you turn down her offer?" Laust replies, "When she asked me to live together, I was thrilled, but there's something I needed to make sure of first." Just then, an adventurer, disguised as a waitress, approaches them to take their drink orders. She tells Laust that she has the results of the investigation he requested. Zeke, surprised, asks, "Do the guild members here pretend to be private investigators too?" She responds, "No, they don't. I'm doing this on my own. If it were guild business, I wouldn't come to a place like this at this hour." She then hands Laust a report about Narcinia, revealing that she is the only daughter of the Earl and Countess of Analastoria. Under normal circumstances, she and her husband would inherit the title. However, one day, Narcinia announced that she wanted to become an adventurer instead. Zeke comments, "I don't see a problem with that. It's uncommon, but there are noble adventurers." The waitress agrees, but she points out that Narcinia is just a young girl, and most parents wouldn't allow their daughters to do something like this. Laust realizes that the Earl of Analistera must have opposed this decision from the beginning. The waitress confirms this, adding, "At first he was against it, but then something shocking happened." The scene shifts back to Narcinia and her friends. Narcinia confides, "I wasn't born with blue hair. When I was a child, I had blonde hair, just like my parents. But one day when I woke up, its color had changed." Lyra said, "I've always told myself that having blue hair isn't ordinary, but I've never heard of anyone waking up to find their hair turn blue overnight." The scene then shifts. I almost didn't recognize Narcinia at first, because she had grown older. The biggest reason, though, was her different hair color. "Still, I can't believe it happened overnight," she told him. "The reason is still unknown," she replied. But that day, Earl stopped opposing his daughter's decision to become an adventurer. He changed his mind because he didn't expect her to live long. So he wanted her to do what she loved. "That's actually common," added the girl. "Even for someone who can kick a phoenix flying in the air, it doesn't seem like she's someone close to death. She became an adventurer with her parents' full support," Lois responded. "Yes, I want to trust Narcina." He added, "But the explanation I got from her and my mentor wasn't convincing enough. If Earl were still opposed, I'd send her home. If she still wants to be an adventurer, I'd tell her to convince her parents first. And of course, I'd help her as much as I can. Then we see Narcina. Sad. Lyra tells her Earl's daughter started training for the one she loved, became an adventurer, formed a party, and defeated monsters. She even asked him to live with her. If I have to learn from your experience and be more assertive in my dealings. Lyra then goes to Zeke and says, if this suits you, do you think you can allow me to be your partner? Zeke replies, I have no reason to oppose that. Aren't we already members of the same party? She tells him, I'm not talking about being adventuring partners, I'm talking about being life partners. Zeke is surprised and laughs at her. I'll think about it, he says, angrily. Lyra responds, can't you consider my feelings even a little? It's reassuring coming from you. All I mean is that you haven't thought about it before, so this is at least a step forward. I want us to succeed together. Afterward, we see Loest and his friends standing outside the door, overhearing everything. Jeanette. Are you going to explain? Loest talks to Narcina and asks her to go with him tomorrow, saying, there's something important I want to tell you. The scene transitions to a man playing with children using toy figures. The evil dragon demanded eternal slumber, while the sleeping princess was willing to sacrifice her life. Because I believe in the idea that a courageous hero will rise again to save the world someday, the sleeping princess stood before the evil dragon. Thanks to the great sacrifice of the sleeping princess, the world entered a period of peace and tranquility. And that's how today's episode ends. Stay tuned for the upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell so you won't miss anything new.